Hi YouTube, I recently finished my Baldur's Gate 3 playthrough a few days ago, and I wanted to make some videos about the builds that I came up with, perfected, and the different items that go along with them as I play through the game. So there'll be timestamps in the description below that you can click through for the leveling and the different acts, and then I'll have different sections for each individual item slot, and then those sections will be split up on when you get the item in which act. So this is my build that I used for Karlach, who's a Tiefling Barbarian you get, and I wanted to keep her build sort of in character, so she's still a barbarian, she's still using big two-handed weapons, but I essentially min-maxed it as hard as I could. You'll see I'm actually jumping strength here, even though strength is the most important stat for barbarian. That's because even as early as the very start of the game in the Druid's Grove, there are vendors that sell elixirs of hill giant strength that set your strength to 21 for essentially the entire day, which means until you take a long rest, and the only time they fall off is if you drop to 0 hit points or end the day. So it's very easy to actually play a full strength character and completely dump your strength stat at the very start of the game. If you're playing this as your main character, you can actually you're going to want to start off with a bunch of points in strength, and then when you get the respec guy from one of the very first sort of like mini dungeons you do, and you have a couple of the potions saved up, you can respec into something like this. If you don't want to do that and you just want to, play normally with the strength and not have to worry about that, either just to, not have to worry about your character losing the buff, or you don't really like using consumables or what have you, feel free to just go like 17 strength and then 16 15, 15 16, etc. There's plenty of ways to increase your strength score, and you're just going to have to change some of your feats to be sort of strength modifiers or wear specific armor. So by dumping strength, you can go 16, 16, and then 10s down, and you have 4 points left to split between these. Personally, I went with wisdom because the most common saving throws in the game are dexterity, constitution, and wisdom. And wisdom also has some good skills like perception associated with it. If this is your main character, or for some reason you want Karlach to be the face of the party, who's essentially the person talking to everyone, you are going to want to use charisma instead of wisdom here, just to use the dialogue options and skills in that. So for Karlach, she has a background you can't change, but it's pretty good. For your player character, obviously you can change it however you want. So her background skills are athletics, which is probably the most important skill for a strength-based character, because they change shove from a weapon attack in 5e, the tabletop, to a bonus action in Baldur's Gate, which means you're pretty much always going to want to be shoving, and you can move people into dangerous things, you can shove them off cliffs, have they take damage or outright kill them. Shoving is extremely powerful in this game, so you want your athletics score, which is what shoving is based on, to be as high as possible. The other thing she gets is survival, which is okay. How survival works is essentially when you're walking around in the wild, sometimes you'll do a survival check, and if you succeed, there'll be an amount of dirt that you can dig up for a treasure chest with a shovel. If you fail the check, you can dig up with the shovel manually by clicking it from your inventory. However, you have to walk around and figure out where it is. So it's a bit of a tassel. It's not too important, but it's nice to have. For the abilities you pick here, I would always go for perception. Perception's probably the most powerful skill in the game. How it works is whenever your party walks by something that requires a perception check, such as a hidden trap, a button behind a door, a hidden lever or something, all 4 of those party members will make a check, and as long as one of them succeeds, you'll be able to see and interact with that item. So try and get your perception score as high as possible without giving up too much on all the characters that you can. So free proficiency at the start of the game is very good. For the last thing, I like to double up on scores I'm already good at. So for example, I have +2 wisdom, so I'm going to have her be the animal handler. Animal handling and nature aren't too impactful. There's a few checks, but none of them are super important. Intimidation, I would definitely go for if I was playing the face. If I had, if I took 14 charisma, or if I just wanted to be the talky person, that's perfectly fine. And honestly, I would take it over animal handling in a heartbeat if I was doing that. However, I didn't actually have Karlach be the talk person because I was playing a charisma-based character, so that's why I went that way. So that's the initial starting scores and the options you can go for that. So I'm going to run through the leveling essentially as quick as I can, and then we're going to go into the magic items. So for leveling, I would recommend on the Barbarian, in addition to most other characters, you're going to want to stick to your main class up until level 5. Level 5 is the biggest power spike of any character, so In general, with a few exceptions, just go straight to level 5, and that'll be all of Act 1. You'll get a feel for the game. Just go right to level 5 before you think about multiclassing or doing any sort of nonsense. Level 2, you get advantage on dexterity saving throws and reckless attack. Reckless attack you're always going to want to use, essentially, because it gives you advantage on all attack rolls. It has the downside that enemies get advantage on attack rolls against you. However, as a barbarian, and specifically with this build, you're going to be extremely tanky, and you're going to want to be the one taking the hits for your friends, so it's really not that much of a downside. In addition, advantage on attacks gives you a much higher chance to hit, so you can potentially even kill enemies before they get a chance to attack you, which is really powerful. Level 3 is when most classes get their subclass. This goes the same for Barbarian. I built mine around the Wildheart subclass, and as a feature you get the Speak with Animals, which you just want to cast at the start of the day, and then it's on the whole time. This is fun because they've voice acted all of the different animals in the game, but there is potions of animal speaking that you can get even at the start of the game for dirt cheap, so it's not that important to have as a feature. However, one of the main reasons we're taking Wildheart is the Bestial Heart features. So there's 5 of these. I'd say 4 of them are usable. I think Elkheart sucks, just don't use this one. Bearheart's what I went with. It's very simple. It just changes your rage from only giving you resistance to physical damage to all damage except for psychic, which is very nice. This ability sucks because it takes a full action and it's pretty bad healing. I ended up not using it, but I mean, that's just my recommendation. Also, you can't even really use it for out of combat healing because as soon as combat ends, you will automatically leave your rage, and you can only use this while you're raging. So Bear is just a very simple, you pick it and you forget, you just are tankier. Eagleheart has a few bonuses, but they're only active while you're raging, so you can't dash as a bonus action. You have to use your bonus action to rage, and then the next turn you can use your bonus action to dash, so I found it kind of awkward. But the Diving Strike ability is very powerful. You just have to get above your enemies, and then you can jump down on them, deal damage, knock them prone. Prone is a very powerful condition because everyone will have advantage on attacks rolls against them as long as they're within 10 feet, and they can't do anything while they're prone, which is really strong. And there's some combos with that later, so feel free to pick Eagleheart if you like and play around with it. You can also change your heart every time you take a level in Barbarian, so feel free to play around with them. Elkheart, like I said, is bad. It's just I found this is a very buggy ability that doesn't do much damage, and the only benefit you get is 15 movement speed when you're raging, which is not very good. Tiger, on the other hand, is extremely powerful. If you want something that's more engaged than the Bear rage, I would definitely choose Tiger. So when you're raging as a Tiger, you get 15 more jump distance, and jumping is another bonus action you can take. When you're early on in the game, it's going to be one of the main ways that you move around the battlefield because you're not going to have as much movement speed as you are later. So additional jump distance is really, really good. In addition, you get the Tiger's Bloodless ability while you're raging, which is essentially just an at-will cleave. So you can attack up to 3 enemies in front of you. It'll have like a little range indicator, and you can make it as many times as you want. It consumes your attack, so it'll be like 1 action per turn, and then when you get extra attack, you can use it twice a turn. How it works is it'll have your damage, but it only has the weapon damage plus your strength modifier. Any additional riders to the damage will still apply in full, and it gives a no save bleed. Bleed is also a fairly strong condition because it's a damage over time, and it gives a disadvantage on Constitution saving throws, and there are some very powerful Constitution saving throws, such early game, such as any type of poison you've applied to your weapon, in addition to the level 2 spell Blindness that one of your party members can do, which is a very powerful debuff that doesn't take concentration. So Tiger is probably one of the more powerful ones. I just personally went for Bear. Wolf is very situational. I would only play this as if you're in a very heavy melee party, and this gives essentially how it works is your allies in melee with you are going to have advantage on attack rolls on the nearby enemies. So if you have at least 2 other party members that are in melee, you can definitely consider taking this. However, for the most part, it's more situational and team comp dependent. So I would personally go for either Bear or Tiger, but again, you can play with them as much as you like. You can also get to choose your piercings for none. Personally, my favorite is the Wolf because you have little like ear things here. Level 4 is when we get our first feat, and as a martial, there's 3 feats you always have to be thinking about when you're building your character. So for Karlach, she's a she's a two-handed weapon person, so we're going to be picking Great Weapon Master, which let us do bonus action attacks on a crit or when we kill a target. You have to actually kill the target, so if you have the passive on that makes you deal non-lethal damage and knock out enemies, it will not count. Additionally, if you kill them with non-weapon damage, it will not count. So The only real non-weapon damage you're going to be doing is the damage, I believe, from one of the rings we equip. Doesn't count as weapon damage, so if that happens to kill them, you won't get it, but it's very few and far between. Additionally, you get a passive you can toggle on that gives you plus 10 damage, which is an insanely high amount because the damage is very bounded in 5e, which is Baldur's Gate system. So even like legendary weapons that you find at the end of the game only have a plus 3 to damage, and plus 10 is just an absurd amount, especially early in the game. However, this comes at the cost of minus 5 to attack rolls, but as a barbarian, you're always going to have advantage, so it gets mostly mitigated. But if you see you're attacking an enemy with reckless attack and you only have like a 20 to 30% chance to hit, even then, you're probably going to want to toggle it off just so you have a higher chance to hit. But for the most part, especially in the end game when you have tons of strength and other modifiers, you can definitely just leave this on all the time. The other feats you want to think about as a martial character, I'm not taking that here because we're using Great Weapon Master, but Tavern Brawl is extremely powerful if you're using unarmed or thrown weapons, and Sharpshooter is the one you want to think about if you are using ranged weapons. It's essentially the same as Great Weapon Master, but just for ranged weapons. That's just general advice. Level 5, like I said, is the big power spike you're going to get. You get extra attack, which effectively is going to double your action economy. Additionally, level 5 is around when you start finding haste potions, items that can grant haste. Level 3 spell is haste, and that'll give you another action, which actually stacks up with extra attack, so anytime you get another action, you'll be able to make 2 full attacks. Additionally, as a barbarian, you also get 10 more movement speed, 10 feet of movement speed, which if you're using the meters system, then it's 3 meters. Now that we've hit level 5, this is about when you're going to start going into Act 2. So I went to Act 2 about halfway through level 5. We want to start actually multi-classing, even though there's some more barbarian features we do want to get. So I actually ended up going into Rogue, which is a little weird flavor-wise, but when you see how we're going to be using it, I think it actually fits really well. So Rogue gives you sneak attack first off that you can only do with a finesse weapon. Luckily, there's a finesse weapon with two-handed you can get in the Underdark at the very start, or not the start, but like towards the later half of Act 2, but when you're hitting level 6, you're already going to be either through that area or in that area, so it's a perfect time to start using that weapon. And the other two-handed finesse weapon you can use for sneak attacks is the one I'm using right here, which is a big glaive you get at the very start of Act 3. Additionally, as a rogue, you get an additional skill proficiency and 2 double proficiencies for expertise. So I always pick athletics here for the reasons I said earlier, and then I went with perception as my other one for the reasons I said earlier again. However, if you're playing the face, you can also decide to take proficiency in intimidation, and for your bonus skill here, you can take one of the 4 dialogue options. I find every dialogue has pretty much one of these, if not all of them, although I did find that deception and intimidation tend to overlap a little bit as far as their outcomes. So if you already have intimidation as a talking person, you're going to want either performance or persuasion. Personally, I like stealth. There's occasional times you use it in combat, so for me it was better than nothing because I didn't have Karlach talking to people. Additionally, you can go for sleight of hand if no one in your party is a lockpicker. You do want one of them, and then I would probably, instead of do perception, you'd take this. You can even take the level in Rogue earlier if you're playing like multiplayer and no one wants to be the lockpicker, because you're going to have a decent dex score anyways. But then you would be delaying your level 5 power spike, so keep that in mind. So let me just pick these back up here, and we're going to take one more level in Rogue before we go back to Barbarian. And this is the main reason we go Rogue, is Cunning Axe and Dash. So this is sort of the main thing we're going to be using this Rogue multi-class for, and I think it works well as a Barbarian to sort of be running around the battlefield as fast as you can. At least that's how I flavored it in my mind. There's a ton of different abilities and items we're going to be proccing with the Dash, and unlike the Eagleheart Dash, you can use this without raging, which is very important. The other 2 things here, Disengage, it's useful for one item that I'll show you, but other than that, you're pretty much not really going to want to use this. And then Hide is occasionally useful. If you're pickpocketing, it's actually very useful because you can pause time by going into turn-based, use Cunning Action Hide, and then it requires a full action to pickpocket in turn-based mode. So you can hide, pickpocket, and then leave, turn off turn-based mode, and you've basically gotten away with it. So good to note if you're the lockpicker person. The level 3 rogue we will come back to, but now that we have a bonus action dash, I want to go back to Barbarian. and we're going to get the other Wild Heart feature, which is your animal aspect. For me, there's a bunch of good ones, but I went with Stallion, and this is what I based my entire build around, essentially. How it works is whenever you dash, you get temporary hit points equal to twice your level. This is your character level, not your Barbarian level. And temporary hit points don't stack with other temporary hit points. You also can't refresh the temporary hit points until they're completely gone. So at this level 8, you're going to get 16 temporary hit points whenever you dash that you can do as a bonus action. And then when those deplete fully, so even if you're at 1 out of 18 and you dash, you're still going to get 1 out of 18. But when they're fully depleted, which is sometimes why you want to just eat the opportunity attacks, you can refresh them as a bonus action. This essentially allows Karlach to function completely without a healer. You can sway your party composition more towards like damage, more towards utility aspects. You don't have to run around with like a life cleric or whatever. Especially good if you're not that familiar with the combat system. It gives you a ton of leeway, and you're going to be hitting level 8 around halfway through Act 2. So right when things sort of start to ramp up as far as boss fight difficulty, and this makes it a lot easier. Level 9, which is where I ended Act 2. I ended Act 2 at like level 9.5. I'm not sure if Tactician affects experience or not, but I played through on Tactician and that's where I ended up. You're going to want to finish your Rogue subclass, and of course we're going to be taking Thief, which is a very common subclass for people multiclassing into Rogue to take because it gives you a bonus action. This is extremely powerful for a myriad of reasons, but mostly because as a Barbarian, we're pretty bonus action starved. Rage is a bonus action, the Great Weapon bonus attack is a bonus action, shoving is a bonus action, and now we have dashing, disengaging, and hiding as bonus actions. Also, drinking potions is a bonus action, and applying poisons is a bonus action. So we have a lot of things we want to do with our bonus action, so having a second one is very, very strong. This means you can rage, kill a target, move over to another one, use your bonus action to attack with Great Weapon Master in the same turn. If you're super far away, you can double dash over to someone and then still have your full attack. You can hide and then attack. You can do a ton of different stuff with this. So it's very strong, and at this point, level 9 is when you're, or at least when I went into Act 3, and your build is going to be essentially complete at this point. You have all the pieces. Whenever you have 2 bonus actions, whenever you dash, which you can do as a bonus action, you get a ton of hit points. And then you have all of the main features of a Barbarian, and if you want to be like a lockpicking sneaking rogue, you also can do that if you'd like. The last 3 levels are going to vary your build. I played with a couple, and I'll show you what I ended up with, but some options before I do that. If you're playing like on your own as a half-orc Barbarian, which is what I recommend, is like a player race, if you were to like really min-max, you could actually take the next 3 levels all in Barbarian to get to the level 9 feature of Brutal Critical that'll give you an additional dice when you crit, which stacks with your racial dice. Notably, I would probably not use the crit build if you're going to be like a full strength-based, like if you want to use the big strength 2-handed sword at the end of the game, because with a great sword, you only get 1d6 from the half-orc and the Barbarian feature for Brutal Critical, as opposed to using like a glaive here, you would get 2 more d10s instead of d6s, or like a battle axe or like a war maul, you'd be able to get a d12. So that's just something to keep in mind when if you want to go crit focused. Other than that, what I actually like to do is take 1 level in Rogue, and this gives you another feat. Feats are very powerful, like I said earlier. If you are if for some reason you don't want to mitigate the strength dump with either an item or an elixir, here is where you would take your ability score improvement. So it would be at the very start of Act 3, which is actually when you start getting Cloud Giant elixirs that set your strength to 27, so it's a bit bigger of a opportunity cost to not be dumping your strength at this point. However, there are some really powerful reasons to want to do that, so I'll explain that in the item section. What I actually take is, because I'm using this glaive here, which is a finesse weapon to trigger sneak attack, is I like to take Polearm Master. Now, this feat's kind of bugged, but I still really like it. The opportunity attack you get when people move into you is the main reason I like this feat, because it allows you to weaponize your reaction a lot easier, because normally you can only take opportunity attacks when people move out of your range, which the AI doesn't really like to do unless it has to. And when you use a reaction attack, you actually proc your sneak attack a second time in the round because it counts as a different turn. So it's really powerful to be able to do that. It is kind of bugged though, because in tabletop, how it works is you have reach as a feature with like a glaive or a polearm or whatever, so you can actually make the attack before they come into range. However, how I found it works in Baldur's Gate is they will complete their full movement in like their one thing, and then it will trigger your reaction, and then you can use your reaction to attack them, which means you can't actually combo it with the Sentinel Fate to completely stop their movement before they can attack you like you can in tabletop. So for this reason, I really like it. However, it's not as good as it is. Also, you get a bonus action attack if you've made the attack action this turn. This only applies in combat, so if you're not seeing it when you're testing it around in camp, that's why you have to be like in combat in the initiative order for it to see it. But this bonus attack action, you really don't want to use it unless you don't have another action for your bonus action. However, it can proc sneak attack, but it only adds the 1d4 plus your strength modifier. No other modifiers apply to this attack, which is why some people may think it'd be bugged. We'll see if it gets patched or not. I don't know. Who knows? But it's better than nothing, especially because we have 2 bonus actions to use every turn. Additionally, it does take the -5 to accuracy from your Great Weapon Master, but it doesn't get the +10 damage. So you usually, if you're going to use this attack, want to turn that off. However, by the time you would be getting this feat at level 10, you either with the Cloud Giant Elixir or a bunch of the Act 3 items, your hit chance is going to be so sky high that honestly I just didn't even bother turning it off for the most time. Now, for the next 2, if you aren't strength stacking and you didn't get the Hag's Hair, or you want to open up your armor options because one of the armors you can wear gives you +2 strength, but only up to 20, you can go all the way to level 8 Barbarian and get another feat. You also get some good feats here. So Feral Instinct, Can't Be Despised, +3 to Initiative. Initiative bonuses are very strong in Baldur's Gate because unlike in the tabletop, initiatives roll with a d4 instead of a d20, which means any of the flat bonuses are super impactful. So this is really good. And then level 8, you get a feat. In addition to ignoring difficult terrain, at least the movement aspect, you still take damage. So the additional feat is really good there. However, what I like to do instead, because I dump strength and I don't need to take the ability score improvement, is I actually go and now take some levels in Fighter. Fighter gives you another bonus action once per long rest or short rest. You can use this. It's just free healing. Frankly, by the time you get this, you're not really going to be using it. You'd be better off using a potion or something. But if you really have nothing else to do, it's free healing for a bonus action. Fighting style here, you can take defense. However, you have to be using armor, and that turns off your unarmored feature, which is even more powerful because this might as an Act 3. And how the AI works in Tactician, at least, is they will intentionally target the lowest AC party member that they can reach without endangering themselves. So higher AC on your tank is not necessarily always a good thing. What I like to take instead here is Great Weapon Fighting, because unlike in Tabletop, this actually rerolls all of the damage when you roll a 1 or a 2 on all of your dice, not just the weapon dice. So this includes your sneak attack dice, this includes any dice you get from buffs or magical items. So it's actually a really powerful fighting style. And then, like you may have seen before, in many builds, Fighter level 2 for Action Surge, essentially it's once per long rest you get another action, which is 2 attacks, 2 throws, whatever you like. It's very powerful, however it is once per long rest, so your mileage may vary. You can also decide to, if you don't want to use that, you want a more consistent benefit, go back here to Barbarian and take the Feral Instinct feature. Personally, I'm a big fan of the Action Surge, and the Feral Instinct wasn't too important to me, especially because of the shenanigans you can do with Action Surge and the amount of damage you can do as a Great Weapon Master. So that's the build. I found it worked pretty well. If you have any questions about it, leave them in the comments below. I'll try to answer them as best as I can. I've played this game for over 100 hours at this point, so I know pretty much all of the mechanics, but if I don't know, I'll direct you to like a wiki or something that you can try and figure it out at. Now let's go into the items. So I'll try and timestamp all of them, and I have them organized here based on what act you get them in, Most of the items you're going to want to use are going to be in Act 3, because that's where the most powerful items are. However, there are a couple in Act 1 and Act 2 that are extremely strong, and they're definitely missable, because you get locked out of Act 1 halfway through Act 2, and you get locked out of Act 2 as soon as you go into Act 3. So keep in mind there. So let's start off with the Elixirs. There's a couple you can use. There's one I didn't include, but that's because I think it's worse than the giant ones. It gives you 1d4 to your attacks, and I think having a higher strength is just better. Heal Giant Strength you can get at the very start of the game very easily. All the vendors, potion vendors, restock it. Always keep an eye out for like Giant's Toes and stuff that you can pick up or buy, because then you can craft more of these. But you should have healthy supplies. This is even all the ones I have. I have a ton more. But you just use this at the start of the day. And you have to refresh it if you die, so try not to die as much as I do. Sorry, that's a and yeah, this is the elixir you're going to be using for Act 1 or 2, and then in Act 3 you get a Cloud Giant Strength elixir, which sets it up to 27. So if you see here, it sets it to 27, and this ignores, because it sets it to it, it ignores all bonuses, which is why you can fully dump your strength. You don't have to worry about any strength bonuses or anything. 27 is, in at least 5e D&D balance terms, like Realm of the Gods tier. It's like preposterously strong. So +8 to checks and attacks in a bounded accuracy damage system, in addition to the damage, is like really, really good. So that's why I prefer using this. However, the other elixirs are the Viciousness elixir and the Bloodlust elixir. Personally, I don't think the Viciousness elixir is worth it, even if you are crit stacking, because of how powerful the other two elixirs are, and there's items that can increase your crit chance already. So I don't actually value this as highly, because its comparative value, as opposed to if it was the only way to reduce your crit chance, is a lot lower. The elixir that you would consider not using Cloud Giant for and not dumping strength for would be Bloodlust. The temporary hit points don't matter because they don't stack with our dash temporary hit points, but killing an enemy to get an additional action is extremely powerful. Additional actions are very strong, especially when you have extra attack, and there's a mob or an ad you can kill in pretty much every boss fight, so don't worry about only being able to do single target damage, like, oh, it doesn't do anything. Trust me, it'll work. If you want to use the Bloodlust, you're going to have to mitigate your strength without using an elixir. And there's a couple ways to do this. One is just do it naturally. So you want to take ability score improvement feats at levels, I believe it was 10 and 12. You can also take a +1 from the Hag in Act 1, and then take one ability score fate, and then the other one you can do whatever you want with it. Additionally, at the start of Act 2, there's this piece of clothing that gives you +2 strength, but it caps out at 20, which means you don't have to use more than 1 feat on ability score improvement. So this can be a good option for that, to just always wear this armor. Additionally, at Act 3, one of the more difficult dungeons you can find, Elixirs of Giant Strength, Gauntlets, and that'll set your score to 23, so you won't have to worry about that way. You will be losing 2 modifiers, so this will be a +6 on attacks as opposed to +8, but giving that up for the Bloodlust is arguably pretty good, although it should be noted the best greatsword in the game does double your strength modifier, so you would be losing 4 instead of 2. But that's something to keep in mind, and it's not my favorite weapon on this character either, so depends on what you want to do and how you want to mitigate that. So let's just go through with the Helms. In Act 1, we have the Haste Helm. It's just a generic, it doesn't have the armor tag, so you get to keep using your unarmored defense. A starter combat, which is when you need the most movement, typically you get momentum, which I believe just gives you a little bit more movement. So, pretty good generic helm. Other than that, there's nothing else really in Act 1 that I thought was worth it as a helm. So I would either wear this or just don't wear anything at all. You can always turn off your helmet visual here. As you'll see, I think that one looks kind of silly, so I just have it turned off. In Act 2, about halfway through, you can get this helm, the Holy Lance helm. It does have the medium armor tag, so as you'll see, I have 22 armor class because I'm fully unarmored. If I put this on, it drops it to 14 because I don't have the unarmored defense feature active anymore. However, what this helm does is, if creatures miss their attack against you, they have to make a dex save or take 1d4 damage. This damage does stack with a few other things, such as the Callous Glow Ring or one of the hidden powers you get that you can unlock, and it gives you a 1d4 to all your attacks. It actually counts that, so it will be doing a little more than 1d4. Also, in Act 2, when you get this, most of the enemies are either like undead or shadow creatures, so they're either weak or they take full damage from radiant damage. So it's a pretty good helm for Act 2 specifically. All of the other helms are in Act 3. So I'm going to go through the one that I like to use, and then I'm going to go through the unarmored ones, and then I'm going to go through the armored ones. So this is what I like to use because Karlach is my frontliner, my solo frontliner, and this is the best defensive helm in my opinion. And it's not a armor, so I was able to go fully unarmored. But if you would like to use medium armor items, and there's a big motivation to, because some of them are really good, then that unarmored tag doesn't matter as much. The reason this helm is good, the action isn't very good. It's a ranged fear. It only does damage if they're already burning, and your DC isn't going to be very high, so it's not very good. It's also a full action, but it's like a ranged option, because fear is a very powerful condition. The reason I use this helm is all these other reasons. Enemies can't land crits on you, which is a very powerful defensive layer because crits are pretty strong, and enemies rolling against you with advantage because you're using reckless attack, they have a much higher chance to get crits. Magical durability +2 saving throws against spells, just generically powerful. And then Infernal Sight is essentially magical blind sight, so you can see through the darkness spell, you can see through fog clouds. It's a very powerful condition to have, especially when you only have one frontliner, which means you can safely just completely blind their entire frontline with like a darkness spell, and then you're still free to act. Ooh, sorry. Other Act 3 helms are... This is pretty good, but I think it's one of those items that's better on a different character. You can see the bonus here is very good, and you can get it right at the start of, or not at the start, but very early into Act 3 when you get into Baldur's Gate proper. You go to the Devil's Fee, you sneak upstairs, and it's in a chest by the bed. So it's extremely easy to get, as opposed to the Helldesk Helm is a more like later Act 3 item. But it's so generically powerful that I prefer using it on some of my other characters, such as like Astarion with like a Ranger build or something like that. A Bone Spike Helm you can get pretty early too. It's in the sewer. I believe a sewer vendor sells it in Baldur's Gate, and it has some okay bonuses. As you can see, the rage damage isn't much to scoff at. I mean, or it is. And then Intimidation's nice if you're a face, but what you really want here is the Menacing Attack. It essentially, once per turn, you can make attack action, and it has a chance to frighten target. The DC again isn't high, but you can do this every turn. There's no cost, there's no short rest recharge, you can just always do this. So it essentially just modifies your basic attack. And frighten is a very powerful condition, especially if you combine it with other things such as prone, such as like Stinking Cloud, damage effects like that are on the ground. So it is a very powerful condition, which would be the reason you want to do this, is if you're comboing it with other things. I don't think it's worth using on its own and giving up benefits of the other helmets. But if you are going to be abusing the feared condition, it's a very strong helmet to use. The last helmet for the unarmored section is the Horns of Berserker, which this might be the one you get in the vendor. I don't know. They're all in Act 3. Act 3 kind of like melds together in my mind because it's balanced in such a way that you can pretty much go anywhere at any point in the act, because it's all mostly balanced around you being level 12. So yeah. But the benefit here is it gives you the same +2 attack rolls that this helm does, but only when creatures have already taken damage. So most of the time, not always, so like your first attack won't have the +2, but the other ones will. So it's nice. The main benefit here offensively is when you're not at full health, which counts like you can be at -1 health. So if I was at 150 over 151, I would be at not full health. You get +2 necrotic damage, and also if you haven't been dealt any damage this turn, you get dealt a little damage, which is normally a downside, but as a Barbarian, it helps you keep your rage up, and additionally, it can help you whittle off those last few points on your temporary hit points if you need to. But that's only if you haven't done damage, and typically you're going to be wanting to do damage every turn. So essentially, +2 damage, +2 attack rolls for the most part. It's a very powerful offensive helm, and it is cloth. So my two options that I would do is, or I guess three, is Bone Spike if you're going to abuse the fear, Horns of the Berserker if you want a more offensive-oriented helmet, and then the Helldusk helmet that I'm wearing if you want a more defensive helmet. For the armored helmets, we have the Crit Fishing helmet, which is Sarvok's Horn helmet, which is behind a boss fight. You get normal Dark Vision, which isn't very strong for melee characters. Dark Vision's only really important for ranged characters in this game, but it reduces your crit chance, the die you need to roll by 1, which is essentially a 5% increase from 5% to 10%, and it stacks with all the other things. And each one of additional instances of crit range increase you get makes it more powerful, but it also has diminishing returns, which is why I'm not a fan of the Elixir, because comparatively, when you equip a bunch of these items, the one more is not as powerful as the first instance. You also can't be frightened, which is really strong defensively, because as we talked about, frightened is a very powerful condition. And then the con saving throws, it's more important for casters. It's not really for us. But if you're crit fishing, this is the helm you want to use. It is medium armor, however, so you want to base your build around medium armor. Defensively, this is probably the best medium armor helm, although it's another one of the helms that I think is so generically good, you'd want to use it on a different character that doesn't necessarily have the effective hit points and the temporary hit points that the Barbarian has. But as you can see, it's extremely powerful, and the 2 hit point healing a turn works really strong if you go down, because if you go down to 0, now you don't need someone else to bring you up. You will automatically return to standing and fighting as long as you're wearing the helm at the start of your turn. Another interesting thing to mention is this is another way to get crit immunity, and crit immunity, again, is another good defensive layer to have. The last helm here that I didn't get a chance to use just because of how my party comp worked out, there was a bunch of incidental healing, so it was sort of difficult for me to keep Karlach at like 50% hit points, is this. But if you are able to do that, it's actually very powerful in this build because you can mitigate so much damage through temporary hit points, which means you're not really cutting your effective hit points in as much as you would in a different build that doesn't have the resistances and the temporary hit points that this build does. So I could definitely see a build around the Helm of Grit, and then maybe you wouldn't even maybe need to take a Thief subclass. You could do some other stuff, but I didn't get a chance to play with it, so I'll just mention it here because it does seem like it could be powerful. That's all the helms. So let's go to the capes now. You don't have any capes in Act 1 that are going to be any good, at least none that I found, so I just wouldn't bother with that. Act 2, very start of Act 2, you can get this cloak, but again, it's one of those items that's very generically powerful, and I would rather use this on another character that doesn't have as much AC or is casting concentration spells a lot so they can benefit more from the saving throws, whatever. But it is an extremely powerful cloak, just know that, and you can get it very early on. The other two Act 2 cloaks are the cloak here of Cunning Broom and the one I'm wearing, the Flesh Melter cloak. This cloak, the Cunning Broom, let me show you how it works. This is the one thing I mentioned for disengage, is essentially when you disengage, what you can do as a bonus action, you create a little fog cloud around you, and then you'll blind everyone that's in it, but because I'm immune to blinded, it said I was immune.
Well struck.
Sorry about that, Withers. But anyways, the problem with that is a lot of the items that say, like, while you're obscured are super bugged, and they will, like, permanently apply even if you're not obscured, even if you're not even wearing the item anymore. So I felt that making a build around, like, an obscuring sort of build and, like, items around that and, like, being in a fog cloud the whole time just wouldn't, like, work really well because of how buggy it was. The other cloak that I was just wearing is the Flesh Melter cloak, and I really like this one. This is the one I wear pretty much all the time, is because it does 1d4 acid damage whenever you get hit with melee damage. The 1d4 acid damage also benefits from stuff such as the ring and the mad power you can get through the main story. And that's every time you get hit. And additionally, around this time is when enemies are going to start having the extra attack feature, which means they're going to be attacking you twice a turn, which means they're going to be taking that damage twice a turn. So I think this cloak is really good. Additionally, it's good for a frontline fighter as opposed to the Cloak of Defense, which is good on pretty much everybody. So I like this cloak specifically for Karlach. In Act 3, there's a couple newer cloaks. The Derivation cloak. Whenever you poison a foe, you heal yourself 1d4. This is good potentially because you can trigger healing effects and you can keep your flat HP topped off. However, it's not very good for this build, but I just wanted to point it out here because it's something you can definitely use. You just have to remember to poison your weapon or use a weapon that has native poison damage on it. The other one is the Cinder Moth Cloak, and this is sort of like team comp dependent as an Act 3. Whenever a creature damages you within 7 feet, which isn't quite melee range, and it doesn't have to necessarily be a melee attack, they get the Burning Condition. The Burning Condition, not only does it deal 1d4 fire damage per turn, it also interacts with a few items that your allies might be using, or I haven't dug into like fire magic much, but I'm sure there's some sort of synergies there that you can use it with. However, it's also very bad with the water-based, like ice, lightning, wet comp abusing thing that I ended up going with, so that's why I ended up going for the Flesh Melter Cloak instead of the Burning. Additionally, you can proc the Flesh Melter Cloak more times, as opposed to the Burning is once they're burning, they're burning. So that's the cloaks. Like I said, this is my favorite, even though it is just an Act 2 item. Armor. In Act 1, you have the Blood Guzzler Garb you can get extremely early on, or not extremely, I think this is actually from the Underdark. If you kill the Boulette, I believe it drops this. So that's like level 4 or 5. Before that, you can just wear either the best medium armor you could find, or just go ahead and wear nothing. But this is nice. It's just whenever you get hit, you get Wrath, and then Wrath is just flat physical damage to your melee attacks. So it's just a little benefit you can have. The other Act 1 item is another very generically good item, the Adamantium Scale Mail you get at the Forge. I think the best items at the Forge are the 2 armors and the shield, and all of them give you crit immunity, so this is another source of crit immunity. And this one reduces all the damage you take by 1, and then whenever someone hits you, they get Reeling, which is -1 to their attacks for each turn remaining. So every time they hit you, they get -1 to their attacks, and it keeps stacking up. So it's a very good defensive armor. However, noted it's medium armor that doesn't have the rider of your full dex mod, so you are going to only want to have your dexterity at 14 if you end up wanting to use this one. But it is probably a very powerful Act 1 thing to wear. In Act 2, there's a couple things you can get, but these are, I believe, both in Act 1, actually. The Oakfather's Embrace, I think I got this from the Druid's Grove, from a vendor, but I'm not sure. It's somewhere in Act 1. But it's only good in Act 2 because there's a lot of beasts in Act 1, so you don't want to be taking additional damage. However, in Act 2, it's pretty much all undead. So being able to reflect a d6 radiant damage is really powerful, again, for the same reason as the Helm. And this is a good combo with this Helm that you also get in Act 2, because now you're reflecting 1d4 and 1d6 radiant damage to all the undead that are attacking you. And if undead are attacking you multiple times per turn, they're just going to vaporize themselves. So this is a very unique, like, Act 2 specific combo that I just wanted to point out. Additionally, the Luminous Armor is something you can wear because the Radiant Shockwave is a very powerful effect. Essentially, they inflict Radiant Orb, which is, again, another -2 attack rolls, but it's in a huge AoE. It also lights enemies up for other effects that you might have, with such as this ring that you can also get at the end of Act 2. And it's very good for that. And it also works with the Holy Lancehound, because that's radiant damage. And the ring, like I just pointed out. However, this one is more for like a cleric that's running around with Spirit Guardians than necessarily the Barbarian build. But I just wanted to point it out because it is a very powerful weapon, especially when you get this ring, because you're going to be inflicting Radiant Orb on every single attack. So these ones are actually in Act 2. These 2 are in Act 1, but they don't really turn on until Act 2. The Mighty Cloth is the very start of Act 2, I believe, the Quartermaster in the end or something. And this is one I pointed out earlier, where if you're strength dumping, this is a good way to get 2 more strengths. So you get 2 strength, you also get bull strength, which advantage on strength checks. It doesn't matter too much, because whenever you're raging, you get this anyways, but it's nice when you're not raging to have advantage on your shoves. And for a more quality of life thing, you also get double carrying capacity, which is really nice. And then this is the same action as the Elk Heart. It's not very powerful. It uses your full action. It doesn't always knock people prone. Sometimes it just moves them to the side, even the one you're targeting, and it can be saved against, and it doesn't do a lot of damage. So I wouldn't worry about this too much, but +2 strength is really strong, especially at the start of Act 2, and you also have advantage on being restrained, and you can't be shoved, which is really nice. Another thing you get a little in the way of Act 2. Actually, no, this is right at the start of Act 2. This one's the one you buy, and I believe this one is later in, but they're both very early on. This is the first of the dexterity armors that takes your full dexterity mod. So this will give you a +3 because of your dexterity, as opposed to just a +2. Additionally, you also get +1 to initiative rolls, and you don't have disadvantage on stealth checks. So it's a very strong medium armor. I believe this is also Act 2, but it might be Act 3. I'm pretty sure it's Act 2, like late Act 2, though. This is another option as opposed to the Mighty Cloth if you want to go an unarmored route. It just gives you +2 Constitution, which, as unarmored, will give you another armor class, in addition to giving you the health and all the other benefits of Constitution. On top of that, when you're raging, you generate 2 turns of Wrath. So, pretty good. It's just a nice little bonus on top of the Constitution. Now, the Act 3, you have, again, some more powerful armor. You can still roll around with the Scale Mail. That's very strong. And you can roll around with the Mighty Cloth if you need the strength. However, in Act 3, I definitely wouldn't use this because you can get an amulet that bumps it up. So this is kind of worthless. These two fall off because you're not going to be doing as much. You're not going to be fighting undead, like, at all, pretty much. There's a couple, but for the most part, not really. The Luminous Armor, you can still keep wearing this for the utility it provides, but it's going to definitely hurt your AC a lot. You could replace your Yonti Mail with the Armor of Agility that you can get right at the start of Act 3. You just go to the armor and buy this. I believe, or it might be at the start of Baldur's Gate, I don't know. But very early on to Act 3, you can get this. And it has your full dexterity mod, so you get the +3, so that sets you to 20 AC. It gives you +2 to all your saving throws, which is really strong, and you don't have disadvantage on stealth checks. Very strong. This is my go-to medium armor option because it's very strong on a Barbarian because you want to have higher dex because of the unarmored defense and stuff. Additionally, you can still stealth, and +2 in saving throws is pretty good, but it's also very generically powerful, so if you want to use something else, such as the Adamantium Scale Mail or the Luminous Armor, you can feel free as well, and then put this on someone else. The Barbarian specific option you have in Act 3 is the Bone Spike Garb. This one, I'm pretty much 100% sure you can buy at the start. It is another cloth item, so you'd want to wear this for a unarmored build. The first thing here doesn't really affect us, the temporary hit points, because we're already going to be full with temporary hit points from dashing. Reducing incoming damage by 2 is actually very powerful because when you're raging, you're taking half damage from pretty much everything, which means this 2 is pretty much a 4. And if you're negating damage enough, you can actually get it down to where you're not taking damage. I didn't go for that in this build just because we already have the temporary hit point buffer, so it made no sense to really go for that, but it is pretty good. Additionally, you're reflecting 6 piercing damage, which is, as most reflect damage is on your frontliner, very strong. So this is my go-to when you're being unarmored, and then I'd either go for agility or scale mail if you're wearing medium armor. As you can see, I'm currently using like an unarmored setup. Gloves. In Act 1, there's a couple good ones. I'd say the best one is probably Braces of Defense. It's a flat +2 AC. You can get these. I think they're in the Blighted Village somewhere. It's been a while. But you can get these right away, and they're good the whole game. It's just a flat +2 AC for your glove slot. But again, it only applies if you are fully unarmored. Some other good Act 1 ones are the Gloves of Missile Slaring. I believe you can buy these in the Grove, but it's early Act 1, and it gives you a way to sort of negate damage as a reaction. And early on, the 1d10 plus your dex mod is going to be pretty much like an entire Goblin Arrow. So you can essentially, instead of taking that damage, you can just negate it to 0, which is really good, or like 1 or something. So these were really good too defensively. I personally prefer the Braces of Defense, but if you're wearing medium armor, if you want to wear medium armor for some reason in Act 1, you can feel free to use these. These are uniquely good for the Eagle Heart if you want to jump around a bunch and get your diving attack off. and they're Act 1, but you're not really using bonus action dashes until like Act 2 because of how the subclasses worked. But these are something to keep in mind you want to pick up if you want to do that. They essentially, when you're in combat and you take the dash action, another type of jump will pop up in your bonus actions, or just like the normal bar here on the bottom, and you're going to want to use that jump, and it'll not cost you anything when you use it. And you can keep doing it as many times. It says once per turn, but I found that you can actually do it as many times as you like per turn, as long as you keep dashing. It's just one per dash. Late in Act 1, I believe this is the Crush, which is like Act 1.5 because it's a level like 5 area. You can get these. These will give you +1 to attack rolls, and it'll set your dexterity to 18. They're sort of like the Braces of Defense, except they'll only give you 1, but they have the added benefit of giving you +1 to attack rolls. This is also something to consider, so just keep it in mind. I believe these are Act 2, so we're moving into Act 2 items now. These are good once you start dealing radiant damage, either with the Helm, with this, or with that, and you have saves in your party that care about strength, dexterity, and constitution. There's a good chunk of dex saves and constitution saves that are very powerful, and I don't believe shoving is a strength save, but I'm not 100 on that. The actual reverberation prone thing is bugged. It just doesn't work. It would be a lot better if it did, but that just doesn't have text on it. So if you want to debuff your enemies, this is a good gloves to pick up. Additionally, you can get these in, these are actually Act 1, so they should be moved over here. These are in the Underdark Forge area. All this is essentially 1 strength saves, which aren't very common, 1d4 on your weapon attacks. That's it. Just a generic, more offensive item. So you have these as a mix between offense and defense. These are fully offensive, and these are fully defensive. That's definitely Act 2. This is also in the Grimforge area, I believe. This is essentially a worse version of the Gloves of Dexterity. But if you're wearing armor, you can wear these and still get the +1 AC. Just the Bardic Inspiration doesn't have any text on it for us. So this is just an option if you're wearing medium armor and you don't like any of the other options. I'm pretty sure these are Act 2. Again, these are unarmored. I believe all of these are unarmored. Even the Justicars that look like they should be medium armor, yeah. And this is another Radiant Ord synergy. Radiant Ord, again, a nice debuffing sort of thing. So if you want to sort of focus more on that, you can wear these. However, this is, again, probably better with the Luminous Armor and the Luminous Gloves on like a Cleric type. However, it does synergize very well with the Holy Lance Helm, and if you don't want to use the Luminous Armor, you can also use the Oak Fathers, and that deals radiant damage for all of Act 2, so you can really stack up the Radiant Orb pretty heavily if you'd like to go that sort of route. The rest of these are all Act 3. That's the only Act 2 gloves, although I think one of them was. But as you'll see, we actually have a good chunk of powerful Act 1 options for gloves, and Act 3 is similar, except the Act 3 gloves are more situational, I would say, and a couple of them are medium armor. So the first one is this you can get as soon as you get into Baldur's Gate proper, but only if you've saved the Tieflings, specifically the Tiefling Blacksmith, all the way through Act 1 and Act 2. In which case he will be operating a forge, and he will sell a bunch of powerful items, including this. They are medium armor, so you have to keep that in mind, but it gives you a +2 to damage rolls and the attack rolls of weapons, which is very powerful. So this is one of the items that is a motivation for running a medium armor as opposed to unarmored. This is through one of the story quests you can do if you take a certain route. Although, actually, I think you can't even go off of that route until Act 3, so you might just get these regardless. Either way, this is a way to get an additional Bless effect, and it has the Frighten synergy, so you can Charm as a reaction with one of the powers you get, but Frightening you can actually get with the helm we looked at earlier here, the Bone Spike Helm, and that will proc this for 2 turns. And it's essentially the Bless effect, which is 1d4 attack rolls and saving throws, except this one actually does stack with Bless because it's its own individual effect. And the Bless effect is very powerful on its own, and having 2 instances of it is also very powerful. So these are a good pair of gloves to consider if you're going to be going more of a frightening route. The Bone Spike gloves, I believe these are behind a boss. You only really want to use these if you know you're going to be fighting something that has resistance to all of these things, such as the big robots, and there's some other bosses that you can pretty much tell they're going to be resistant to your normal damage. So you can slap these on for them and essentially double your damage. Outside of those cases, I wouldn't really wear these. And the last one, again, is the gauntlets I mentioned earlier that set your strength to 23. So those are gloves. Let's do... Where are the boots? I had them here somewhere. Here they are. I don't know why they're below the rings. So boots, in Act 1 you have 2 of them, but they're actually not very good until you get the bonus action dash. So what I'm currently wearing are the cloth version, and these are not as good as the armor version, so that's another point for the medium armor gang. This is whenever you dash, you gain wrath for 3 turns, and it doesn't say it, but how this works is it's nothing at all like what it says. So once per turn, this is wrong. It's once per dash. So if you're dashing twice per turn, you'll actually stack it twice, and you don't just get wrath, you get 3 stacks of wrath, and wrath stacks up to 7 stacks. So if you dash twice, you're pretty much at cap stacks. And you get it for wrath for 2 turns, but it counts the same turn, I think, which is why it counts. So it's very, very odd. But essentially, this helps you weaponize your dash more. So now you're not only getting temporary hit points, you're also getting 3 points of wrath every time you dash, in addition to the normal benefit of the dash move speed. And these are in the goblin camp in the ward pens, I believe. One of the goblins there drops them. The other one you can get in Act 1 is the Speedy Light Feet. These are medium armor, which kind of sucks because I'd love to be able to run a fully unarmored build and use these, because these are a lot stronger than the Wrath Boots, but alas, medium armor. So this is the same thing, except when it says, it doesn't say once per turn, but it actually is once per turn, and you get lightning charges instead of wrath. So once per turn when you dash, not per dash, once per turn, you get 3 lightning charges. Lightning charges give you, per each one you have, I believe it might just be 1. I'd have to look at some math, but this also only works in combat. And so does the Linebreaker Boots. It also just doesn't say it. This is just a very bad line of text. It gives you +1 of your attack rolls, and I'm pretty sure this doesn't stack. I think the turns is just how many charges you have. So you get +1 of your attack rolls, and you get 1 lightning damage. However, unlike Wrath, where Wrath just adds 1 physical damage, this lightning charge damage counts as a separate instance. So the psychic power that you get through the story, in addition to this ring, will be proccing on your lightning damage. So you'll actually be dealing 3 plus 1d4 if you have all those buffs up with your lightning charges. Additionally, when it stacks up to 5, which you can get basically on your second turn, so if you turn 1 use a bonus action dash, and then turn 2 you dash, you will get to 5. When you get 5 and you hit something, it will discharge all of them, so you won't have it for your next attack. However, you will, in addition to dealing the 1 lightning damage that is its own separate instance that benefits from the ring and the power, you will deal another 1d6 lightning damage that also benefits from the ring and the power. So you can essentially, when you have 5 lightning charges and you hit something, you will get an explosion of numbers on your that'll pop up over the enemy's head, because there's so many different instances of damage occurring, which is why I prefer these over the Wrath Boots. Additionally, it deals lightning damage, so you will be dealing double of just the lightning damage if the enemy is wet or weak to lightning. You also get a +1 to athletics, which is, again, really powerful because athletics is your most important stat as a strength-based frontliner. So those are your Act 1 boots. They're both great boots, but they don't turn on until you hit that level 7 bonus action dash. You can potentially, if you want to play around with Eagleheart, try to get it earlier, but I found that because Eagleheart, you have to be raging to dash, and you don't really want to commit your rage to every fight. In addition, you can't dash and rage with a bonus action at the start of your turn with only 1 bonus action, and because of how the Eagle thing works, it wasn't very good when I played around with it. Start of Act 2, I believe somewhere in the end you can buy these. They're I mean, it's just a great generic pair of boots, but again, it's very similar to the cloak, where these are good in every character. It's just 1 AC, 1 acrobatics. Acrobatics is, I believe, to resist being shoved if your dexterity or your acrobatic skill is higher than your athletics skill, and also to avoid stumbling and falling off of cliffs when you make particularly large jumps. So acrobatics isn't too important, but the +1 AC, also it's not an armored boot, is very strong. However, again, I would probably either you can use this as your frontliner, but as soon as you turn on either of these two boots, I would definitely wear them instead, and then give this to one of your squishier members, or if you have a secondary tank that you like to run around with, you can give this to him. And then for boots, the only other boots we have that I found worth using, there's a couple others, but I sort of narrowed them down as best I could. Were in Act 3, you can get these bone spike boots. There's a little cove in Rivington that you can go through, and then there's sort of a fight that you have to pick a side on, and then if you go into, there's a little cave hidden away, and then if you click on it, you go to a new zone, and then in that cave, there's a big, I believe it's a trapped treasure chest, and regardless of if the treasure chest blows up or not, like whether or not you solve the trap, these boots will pop out. So you can either loot them or destroy all the other items and get these boots. They also give you +1 AC and saving throws, but only when you're not wearing armor or holding a shield, which makes them uniquely powerful for barbarians, which makes sense because they're essentially bone spike boots. And they give you the brutal leap action. And this is essentially replacing your jump with a once per turn leap. And it's the same exact thing as a jump, but it makes the enemies around you take a strength saving throw, otherwise fall prone when you jump next to them. So it's a great synergy with the, to no surprise, the Bone Spike Helm, because if you fear someone who's prone, they just lose their turn, which is really good. I would only wear these if you really want to sort of abuse like a fear thing, or you have motivation for getting things prone, because we invest a lot into getting the bonus action dash, and these two boots, the Linebreaker and the Speedy Lightfoot, are very powerful, and they usually have like a bit bigger cost to them, but by sort of mitigating that cost, I feel like they're a lot stronger. And you can also use this on any frontliner. It doesn't have to be a barbarian, but again, the +1 AC and saving throws is uniquely good for barbarians. So yeah, those are the boots. And then let's go into the rings, back up here. In Act 1, you can get this at, I don't think it's a Goblin Camp. I think it's like a fight before the Goblin Camp, but I don't remember specifically. But this is good. It's just a generic 10 movement speed. Early in the game, one of your biggest challenges as a melee fighter is getting into range of enemies. So having a little extra movement speed is really good. And even later in the game, because you're doubling your movement so often, this actually lets you move a lot farther than it does other characters. So it's a very good ring to use early on, and then even later, depending on your playstyle. And that is Act 2. That is Act 2. Was that really the only one? Yeah, I guess that was the... Oh, no. There's... where is it? Here. The Caustic Band is another one. This is pretty good, but it's another one where you're better off using it on like a sharpshooter that can make a ton of attacks per turn with hand crossbows, or like a fighter with 3 attacks, or like a warlock who's flipping attacks, because it only applies 2 acid damage to your weapon attack. It doesn't actually stack like this one does. You can just buy this in the Underdark in the Mushroom Colony. So I don't like this as good as I do on some other builds, but it is also a very generically good ring. So you could wear Caustic Band and Crusher's Ring in Act 1 and Act probably in some of Act 2, and be very happy with that. So Act 2, you can find the Eversight Ring. I honestly no idea where I found this, but it's very powerful because it gives you blind immunity, similar to the helm I'm wearing. So if you are in darkness or fog cloud, you just are completely immune to that. And magical darkness doesn't get negated by dark vision. However, blind immunity does negate it. So this is a very good ring, especially if you want to be like abusing fog clouds and darkness. Also, blind is like a relatively common condition that can be inflicted on you. So it's just a good defensive ring too. This is one of the bugged rings, one of the obscured rings. +1 AC while obscured. Very, strong bonus, especially if you can use it with the cloak here. You essentially just have like a +1 AC. However, it's bugged, so I didn't really want to include it here. A better version of that is the Ring of Protection in Act 1. However, you can only get it by making a pretty heavy story choice in the Druid's Grove, so not everyone's going to have it, even though it is very generically powerful. Additionally, this is another one of the rings that I would probably give to a caster for better saving throws on their concentration checks, as opposed to the Barbarian that can benefit from different items. The Shadow Cloak ring, I believe, was Act 2. I'm starting to lose my memory on all of these things. But this is actually very powerful, and what sort of inspired me to make the try and make an obscured build in the first place. However, the problem is it doesn't all the obscured stuff is bugged, so I kind of threw that build out in the water. But it adds a 1d4, and because it's a dice roll as opposed to a flat number, if you crit, it'll double that dice. Additionally, if you take either the Savage Attacker Fate or the Great Weapon fighting style, it'll reroll the d4 if you get a 1 or a 2. So dice is generally more powerful than flat when they're around the same amount, but flat is still very good. So this ring is, I believe, late Act 2, or it was hidden under the floorboards. It's somewhere in Act 2. A lot of the stuff where I can't remember where it is, you can look it up and figure it out. Like I mentioned earlier, adds its +2 points of damage, which is radiant damage, even though it doesn't say it, to pretty much everything. You just have to make sure they are illuminated. A way to do this is to cast the light spell on your weapon, and the light spell is just a cantrip, and when you use it once, it lasts all day, no concentration or anything. In Act 1, in the Underdark, you can get this through the little mage tower down there, and you can equip this, cast light on your weapon, and then unequip it. The only downside of this is, as you'll see, it makes the weapon look like kind of weirdly blue, as opposed to what they normally look like, so that's kind of annoying. But you can also use light on another character if you wanted to do that. Additionally, the Radiant Orbs will also inflict Illuminated on your enemies to turn this ring on, in addition to just standing out in the open. So when you get to Act 3, most of the fights just in the Baldur's Gate city or whatever, things are just going to be illuminated anyways. But as precaution, I would definitely just cast light on your weapon and be done with it. Then Act 3 weapons, Act 3 rings, sorry, there's two good ones here. One is the Ring of Regeneration, which is good because if you get downed, it'll automatically bring you back up. However, with this build, I found you really didn't get downed that much, and the incremental healing of the 1d4 hit points every turn isn't very good because we're relying mostly on a temporary hit point pool. So this is probably better served on a different character that you want to maybe have in the front line, but not necessarily be like as tanky as this one. But it is a very good ring. The ring I actually prefer is the Ring of Free Action, where you ignore the effects of difficult terrain, which if you go level 8 Barbarian, that doesn't matter as much. However, you can't be paralyzed or restrained. This is good because archer enemies love to cast the restraining shot, or whatever it's called, all the time, and this just makes you immune to it. Additionally, enemy mages love to cast Hold Person, so this will just make you completely immune to that as well. So these are the two rings I like to go with. Amulet, if you are... I guess that we'll get to that. Act 1, we have the Silver Pendant and the Absolute's Talisman. All the Absolute items, this Absolute section only works if you have the Brand, which is a thing you can get in the Goblin Camp. But I think it has story implications, and I didn't end up doing it. Regardless, this talisman, the benefit here isn't this, it's the aid spell, which you get regardless of if you have the brand or not. And it's level 2, so it's 5 per level, so this is actually 10 hit points. You just use it at the start of the day, and you have to keep the amulet on. It's just plus 10 hit points, which is actually very good at the start of the game. And as a barbarian, you essentially get double your relative HP pool when you're raging, so it's uniquely good on barbarians too. The other thing here is a silver pendant, which is up, or like across from the Druid's Grove. There'll be a little hill that the goblins are shooting from, and then when you're done fighting them, you go all the way up, and this is up there. Guidance is a very powerful cantrip that you use out of combat for a ton of things, and it even works having more than one, because then your guidance caster can cast something else, and then you're casting guidance, so it's very good if you don't have it in the party, or if you only have one in the party, to have this on Karlach, because there's not many other amulets that are like particularly good, so you can feel free to use this for that. And then this is also in Act 1.5 in the Crash, right before the Crash. You can buy this from a vendor. When you're down, automatically stabilizes you, and additionally, you get the maximum number of hit points when you heal. So any dice you roll on potions, if you get healing worded or whatever, that's always going to be maxed. It's a nice little defensive amulet. Personally, I'm more a fan of the Absolute's Talisman, but this is also a great one to just have if you want to like heal up out of combat with potions. And this is Act 2, I believe, start of Act 2. More defensive amulet. Notably, you can't cast spells when you're raging, but the shield spell is only once per long rest. So you'll usually find at least one instance throughout the day that you get a chance to use it. I would say just whenever it pops up, because it'll only pop up if using the spell would mitigate a hit. I would just use it. The main advantage here is the advantage on wisdom saving throw checks, which is one of the most popular saving throws you have to make, because Hold Person is a wisdom saving throw, and there's a bunch of other spells that are wisdom saving throws. So just having that effect is a very good defensive effect. And at this point in Act 2, 10 hit points is sort of starting to fall off, or you may have an actual caster on your party using aid on your whole party. The Act 3 amulets you can get are, there's a couple. This is from a quest you can do that's pretty early and right at the start of the Baldur's Gate. It gives you advantage on not just wisdom saving throws, but also intelligence and charisma. It's essentially the same as this, which with a little more benefit. So it's a very good defensive one, especially if you are not going unarmored. Because if you're going unarmored, you want to be using this one that you can get in one of the more difficult dungeons at the Act 3, and it just flat sets your con to 23. You can also, if you want, respec your con and add some more points here, but I didn't really bother doing that, just because the little bonuses you're going to get there aren't super beneficial, so that's why I did that. But setting it to 23 means you get a +6 to your con, as you'll see here, and that also adds on to your AC, as you'll get a +6 on your AC. In addition, you also get more hit points because your Constitution score determines your HP, as you'll see here. So I get 72 from my Constitution score. So it'll bump you up to a frankly preposterous amount of HP on top of bumping your armor class up. The other option you have is this for like a crit fishing build. However, this is kind of okay. It only works on humanoids. It's only once per long rest, and you have to have crit them beforehand to paralyze them. However, a lot of the crits you're going to get on humanoids are going to be from one of your party members casting Hold Person on them, so they're already going to be paralyzed. So I found even in a crit fishing build it wasn't that good. I would rather have a more defensive amulet, like the Face Ambulance amulet, or a more HP-focused amulet. Let's do the ranged weapon is actually a slot, even if you don't use it that much. At the start of the game, you're not going to have as much move speed, so you're going to need to occasionally use a ranged weapon to hit someone that's out of the way. Later in the game, once you have all your dashes and whatever, you're pretty much going to be able to catch up to anyone you need to, so it's not that big of a deal. So at the start of the game, there's a couple weapons you can get. The hunting shortbow, I believe, is in the Grove. It just gives you advantage on monstrosity type enemies and the Hunter's Mark spell. As a barbarian, Hunter's Mark spell, not very good. Advantage on monstrosities is only occasionally relevant, but it's better than having something in slot that doesn't do anything. This is much better on like a fighter or someone that can actually use the Hunter's Mark, in my opinion. The Bow of Awareness is also a pretty good one. I think this is just a vendor in the Goblin Camp. +1 initiative. Good pretty much the whole game. As we said earlier, flat initiative is a very strong bonus to have. The other one that I ended up using Act 1 is the Titan String Bow. I think this is in the Crash Vendor, but I don't remember. But how this works is, in addition, normally you use your Dexterity when you're attacking with a ranged weapon, but this one also deals damage equal to your Strength modifier, because you're going to be having a high Strength from either just naturally or using a Hill Giant Potion. Early on, this is actually going to do a lot of damage, even though it's a ranged weapon, so that's why I liked using this one. Act 2, you can get the Darkfire Shortbow if you save the Tieflings. This is good because it grants you resistance to fire and cold damage. However, if you have the Bear Heart, you're already going to have resistance to fire and cold damage when you're raging. If you're playing with Karlach, she already has resistance to fire as a Tiefling, so it's not that good. And the haste spell, while powerful, you can't concentrate on it while you're raging, so you either want to save it for a non-raging encounter, or more likely just give this to another one of your party members that doesn't really use their ranged weapon that much, maybe like a caster, and that will give them all of these benefits instead. Personally, I stuck with the Titan String, and I can also recommend the Bow of Awareness too. Act 3, you have a couple. Right at the start, you can buy this, the Hellrider Longbow, and I think it's really good. It gives you +3 to initiative and advantage on perception checks. The Fiendish Fire is kind of bugged. It will, the saving throw will proc in the damage log, but it won't actually work on melee weapons. It'll just say oh, they failed the saving throw, but it won't actually do anything. It only works when you attack with it. But the +3 initiative and advantage on perception is more than worth it for a ranged weapon slot. The other ones you have access to is this, which is I forget where it is, but it's a very strong one. It again gives you the haste spell, except Celestial Haste doesn't have the downside of normal haste, where when it falls off you are stunned for a turn. It has light in it permanently, which is nice, but it doesn't actually work when you're melee attacking because you swap weapons, so it goes away. This one actually does work on melee hits, though, which why you consider it here, but realistically you'd probably want this on someone that can use the haste. This is so when you attack something, you have a chance to inflict Guiding Bolt, and Guiding Bolt is just a condition where it gets the next attack has advantage and then it falls off. Not very strong for Barbarians, it's just an option you can have, because you always pretty much have advantage. It's just something you can maybe consider. And then if you're crit stacking, this is what you want, the Dead Shot. This is in the Baldur's Gate proper merchant, I believe. And it again gives you another improved critical where you need one less to roll a critical effect. Additionally, you get double proficiency when you're attacking with it, but you're realistically hopefully not attacking with range that much. Personally, I like going with the Hellrider's Longbow. If for some reason you're not playing either a Tiefling or a Bear Heart, this is pretty good because Fire and Cold are very common damage types. And if you're crit stacking, you definitely want to go for the Dead Shot. Finally, for the weapons, in Act 1, I think everyone knows about the two-hander and the Demon at the start. That's a very good two-handed weapon with some fire damage on it. I just want to point out some particularly good weapons for your own playthrough. Honestly, just pick the most fun two-hander you like. I'm just going to point out the ones that are uniquely powerful. In the Underdark, which is Act 1 still, but like 1.5, it's a level 5 area, like 4 or 5 area. You can find this in a stone. I think it's like a strength check to pull it out, which you should be pretty good at. It is uniquely a finesse longsword, so you can two-hand it, and it'll deal 1d10 damage, but it also has a finesse property, so you can proc your sneak attack. Luckily, around the time you get this in the Underdark is around when you're going to start getting levels in Rogue for sneak attack. Additionally, it also has a very powerful effect where you can effectively, when you cast it, you can cast this as an action once per short rest, but it's like an action, it's not a spell, so you can keep it going even when you're raging. You can either create like an AoE bless area around you for your allies, but it also stacks with bless, which is always very powerful, or you can create like an AoE damage area that'll like deal 1d4 to the enemies in the area, which is also very powerful. So in general, it's a very strong sword because it has a good action. It also just happens to be a finesse longsword that uniquely enables us to use sneak attack. So I would use this pretty much all the way up till Act 3 personally, but you can feel free to use a stronger two-hander. And again, if you're not up until you have a level in Rogue, you don't have sneak attack, so something like the Ever-Burning Longsword or whatever, or any sort of weapon that has like a bonus damage die on it is going to be more powerful. In Act 3, very start of the act in Rivington, you can go by this, Dancing Breeze. This is what I like using as the final weapon. It is the other finesse two-hander in the game. It's a glaive, so you can use Polearm Master. It's a +2 weapon. It also has a unique weapon art that you can use once per short rest. It's just a big AoE attack. It's essentially just attacks everyone around you in melee range. And the melee range is a little extended because you have reach. So this is my favorite weapon to use. There's a couple more that are good. The Barbarian Giant Slayer is behind, in my opinion, probably the most difficult fight in the game before the last boss. So it's a pretty big fight. But how it works is when you hit, you get double damage from your strength modifier. So if you use the Cloud Giant Potion, you have +8, and then this will give you +16 to your damage. You also get advantage against large, huge, and gargantuan creatures, which there are quite a few more in Act 3 than there are in other acts. However, most of the stuff you're fighting is still going to be human-sized, so this will occasionally come up, and you're naturally going to have advantage on most stuff anyways. Uniquely, I said this is pretty bad for a crit fill, because the crit will give you 46 here, but the additional crits from Half-Orc and Barbarian will only give you an additional 1d6, as opposed to, say, the Dancing Breeze crit will give you another d10. The action is Giant Form. This is something I would use before combat. It gives you 27 hit points, or temporary hit points, which is about the same that we normally get from our dash. As you see here, if I use the dash action, say as a bonus action, I will get 24 hit points because I'm level 12. And this doesn't stack with the Giant Form. But it's still a very powerful weapon in its own right. It also has, again, a pretty strong weapon art that you use once per short rest. And the other one that I didn't do here is this one, the Hellrider Halberd. This you can get, I believe it's in a shop in Baldur's Gate proper, but no, actually, I think it's the guy who's part of Shadowheart's quest at the start of Rivington is a vendor that sells this. But this is good because it has poison damage, so you can use some of the poison synergies. Also, it is flat damage, so +6 flat damage is actually a very large amount. It doesn't have any unique weapon arts or anything. It just has the standard halberd ones, but it is also a halberd that you can use. It can't proc sneak attack because it's not finesse. Similar to the Barbarian Giant Slayer, can't proc sneak attack because it's finesse, or because it's not finesse. But this is something I would also look into. Problem is a lot of enemies are kind of immune to poison. All undead and mechanical types are immune to poison, so it's not a very reliable damage type. But there are a bunch of effects involving poison damage, so that is the other option there. Again, other than that, I would pretty much just use Flavian Louvre all the way up until the start of Act 3, and then buy this, and you're good to go. But you can also just pick and choose whatever fat two-hander you want to use. So that's the build. I had a lot of fun with it. You can do a lot. There's a lot of sort of customization you can do based on your own playthrough. What you need is your party. I had a lot of success using this as essentially a solo frontliner, and that worked out great for me. There's multiple different types you can set up. You got to pick between essentially medium armor and unarmored, but it worked great, and I just wanted to share this build with anyone else who is maybe starting a playthrough on the console, or still, just partway into the game, wondering what to do with their Barbarian or with Karlach.